Hello, ecotopians. It's an interesting week coming up, week 6, and we've got a lot to do, and we also don't have a lot to do. And what I mean by that is we have some really big subject matter. We are going to talk about the near extermination of a people and the near extermination of old-growth redwood. Those are huge topics. And yet not a lot in that I am not going to require you to do a whole lot of memorization for this part of the class for reasons that should become clear later. So not a lot of words, not a lot of memorization, but a lot of heavy topics and also a lot of videos, as you will see. I'll just look at our Moodle page. So the theme of this week is humans in redwood ecosystems. And there's a lot that could be said about humans in the redwood ecosystems. I thought in developing this course that the two topics most concerning humans in ecotopia are the Native Americans and the timber industry. So that's what the focus is on. So regarding Native Americans, here's the deal. I'm a scientist, I am not an anthropologist, I'm not a Native American, I am not really qualified to give you a full in-depth story of the Native Americans in ecotopia. But I did think myself qualified to pass on a thumbnail sketch, 3 main aspects that I think it's important for all of us to be aware of. First of all, the Native Americans have a very long history in this area. I mean, a really long history in this area, thousands and thousands of years of habitation here. So if anyone's an ecotopian, the local Native American tribes are them. The Yurok believe that they have lived here since time began, and anthropologists have another idea that they're 14,000 years or whatever occupation here. Doesn't really matter. The point is untold generations of occupation here. So that's a big deal. Number 2 is, well, in 1849, these European pioneers, invaders, immigrants discovered gold, and mostly Europeans then flooded into this area. So that would be 1849. 10 years later, 1850, there were a series of massacres of Wiyot and other Native Americans in this area. Massacres, just brutal, complete, utter, terrible massacres. And what followed over the next approximately 100 years was essentially a genocide of the Native Americans in the area. So, very troubling, of course. Also, you'll probably hear about the massacre on Tulawater Indian Island near Eureka, and I think about that event every single time I drive from Arcata to Eureka. Every single time I think about that. But it's important to know that that was not an isolated event, that it happened, that massacres happened throughout the Humboldt Bay region and throughout the United States during this time. And so that's bad. We're going to talk and think a little bit more about that in a second. But I also wanted to make sure you know I didn't use the term genocide lightly. A genocide is according to Wikipedia, is a systematic destruction of all or part of a racial, ethnic, religious, or national group. And as you'll see from the presentations today, that this was a systematic attempt at wiping out the Native Americans. Which brings up the third item that I wanted to talk about, which is that it failed. The genocide failed. The Native Americans are still here. They have land, their culture has survived, and I would say in the last 50 years or so, there has been a slow but steady improvement in the living conditions of the Native Americans and their maybe cultural revival. So just like the redwoods, after a century of logging, the redwoods are still here, and so are the Native Americans, which I think is fantastic and gives huge signs of hope. So, but before I leave the topic of genocide, of course, it's a very painful subject to talk about, and I urge you, on the one hand, not to succumb to guilt because you didn't do it, nor to turn away from it and not take any responsibility at all for it. And this is what I mean by it. it's very important for us to understand what humans are capable of. And the massacre of the Native Americans is just one of many massacres that humans have done to others. Think about current events: Syria, Sudan, Rwanda, the former Yugoslavia, the Holocaust, the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia. You could go on, and you know that people do horrendous things to each other. Then just go to the blog in the Lost Coast Outpost, which I hope you have read from time to time. Just Google Lost Coast Outpost and read some of the articles, and then read the comments that people make. And you will see that pretty quickly that ignorance and hatred and cruelty are alive and well, I guess, in human society and people around us. It's there. It's probably a part of human nature. Now, you will probably agree with me that it's a good thing that we are here and we are studying and we have a house over our head and that we have food and that we're not being beat up by other people and killed and torn apart from our families and so forth. That's probably good, whereas Holocaust, genocide, is bad. But it seems it takes a certain amount of vigilance and awareness to prevent that from happening again. So that's one reason why I wanted to raise that and just deal with it front on in this class. It happened. Let's try not to let it happen again. Now, about those redwood trees. Oh no, I mentioned that the Native Americans are still here. They are. They are our political neighbors in that they are occupying sovereign land on their reservations and rancherias. They are our literal neighbors. I think more Native Americans locally live off the reservation than on the reservation, so they are our literal neighbors. And this whole way I'm talking about this of us and them is kind of artificial too, in a way, as we are Native Americans as a class. There are some Native American members of this class, and it's been great talking with them, getting some advice on how to do this part of this class. And so I'm just letting you know that, and as you will see, part of the assignment that is developed for this week encourages you to go out and find some aspect of Native Americana and become familiar with it and report back. So check it out. So the Native Americans I've met are very cool people who I suspect have a lot of wisdom about life in ecotopia. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. Now, about redwoods. So redwoods are very cool trees, duh. They're also very good for timber. So one old growth redwood tree, if you could cut it down and turn it into wood, which you pretty much can't anymore, but if you could, would provide enough wood for 30 homes in one tree. Ooh, very useful, very valuable trees. Lots of money in those trees, very good for the economy, and so that's kind of the way our culture works. If something is very valuable, we take it and we turn it into money. And so, as you know, a lot of the old growth redwood trees fell. 95 to 96% of the primeval redwood forest is gone. And there's this video that you will see. It's from 1947. It shows how this was done, and it's a stunning video. I've watched it again and again. There's something about it that is really hard to put away. It's horrific and fascinating at the same time. But not all of them disappeared. The Save the Redwood League was this organization that united around saving some of the redwoods, not allowing them all to go. For what reason? Well, for the values that are not monetary about primary forest. So this there's a whole story about the Save the Redwoods League, and that's in a reading, actual reading, where you actually have to read something for this class. And I want you to do that and check it out. It's a really interesting story. It's cool. So that's it. I'm not going to say more about that because it's all in the presentations. I wanted to conclude that I could absolutely destroy this part of the class, I thought, by having you memorize lots of facts and figures and dates and stuff like that, and then give you one of those exams like you've been getting. And so instead I just said, stop. What is more important about memorizing all that stuff, I think, is your emotional response to it, because this is deep stuff. The felling of a 3,000-year-old tree to turn it into wood for money for a house? How can we possibly do that? It's very emotional, I think. And different people will have different emotions. I want you to report your emotions. So the exam today, I actually have already given you the questions. So read the instructions on how to take the exam first before you start looking at any of the presentations this week, so that you know what you're going to be examined on or questioned on. Do that, and you'll actually have to type up some responses and have them ready. And then when you open up your exam, you'll just paste them in. And the instructions are all there, so look at the instructions, follow them carefully, and you'll get a fantastic grade on the exam if you do it right. Next week, we will be looking at more, going back to more traditional kinds of learning. And we'll be actually returning again in depth, I think, a more in-depth look at the value of primary redwood forests, and then we'll look more at natural historians in our area. More about that later. Okay, so in the meantime, brace yourself and watch the videos, take the test, ask me any questions you have by email. See you soon.